Have you ever been given a gift you didn't trust? Have you ever been given a gift you didn't trust? My professor gave us an early Christmas present. He said our final exam would be an open notebook test. That means we could use anything in our notes. We could bring our notebook. We could fill it with charts, with dates, with anything we could to help us pass the final exam. We could bring it all with us. But I didn't. The man owed a lot of money. And when I say a lot of money, I mean a lot of money. And it was time to pay up. He got the notice in the mail, and again in email, and again when the large men with swords showed up at his door. It was time to see the king. The kingdom of heaven is like what happens next.
For this reason, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a king who wished to settle accounts with his slaves. When he began the reckoning, one who owed him 10,000 talents was brought to him. And, as he could not pay, his lord ordered him to be sold together with his wife and children and all his possessions, and payment to be made. So the slave fell on his knees before him, saying, "Have patience with me, and I will pay you everything." And out of pity for him, the lord of that slave released him and forgave him his debts. But that same slave, as he went out, came upon one of his fellow slaves who owed him 100 denarii. And seizing him by the throat, he said, "Pay what you owe." Then his fellow slave fell down and pleaded with him, "Have patience with me, and I will pay you." But he refused. Then he went and threw him in prison until he would pay the debt. When his fellow slaves saw what had happened, they were greatly distressed, and they went and reported to their lord all that had taken place. Then his lord summoned him and said to him, "You wicked slave, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. Should you not have had mercy on your fellow slave as I had mercy on you?" And in anger his lord handed him over to be tortured until he would pay his entire debt.
This is kind of a strange story. I mean, how is this story like the kingdom of heaven? A man owes a lot of money to a king, and when I say a lot, it's really an impossible sum, 10,000 talents. Let me put that in perspective for you for just a bit. Remember last Advent we talked about how King Herod might have been the richest man to ever live. And this was a guy who built a mountain just to put a fortress on it. Built a giant city and a harbor and thought it wasn't pretty enough, so he covered the entire outside of the city with marble. He reshaped an entire desert to channel water where he wanted to go. The guy was loaded. Even he could never repay 10,000 talents. This is another way. At the average yearly rate of pay for even the decently well-off upper middle class person in Israel, it would take 125,000 years to pay back 10,000 talents. And that's without interest. You don't want to owe 10,000 talents. It's impossible to owe that much money. Jesus is using hyperbole to emphasize just how much trouble this guy was in and just how much grace is given to him. The king gives a man a great gift, no more debt. I mean, think of all the students who have been clamoring for student loan forgiveness. I know someone who took out $26,000 in loans, has paid back $35,000, and still owes another $45,000. She'd love a gift like that. Your debt is wiped out. You're good to go. I mean, she could start saving for retirement. We have a whole generation of people who don't work in jobs with pensions, but are unable to start saving for retirement until later due to this debt. Imagine what a gift that would be to them. They'd be ecstatic. They'd be thrilled. This should be a happy story about the gift of grace. I mean, the king gives the in-debt servant a gift. It's the gift of freedom. It's the gift of a future. It's the gift of life and a second chance. Is there a better gift? I mean, the servant should be skipping and jumping and hugging everyone he meets on his way home, like George Bailey at the end of It's a Wonderful Life, running through the city. That should be this guy. He should be running through the city proclaiming how great and how wonderful the king is and how grateful he is and happy to be alive. But that's not how the story goes. I mean, it should be how the story goes. I'd like to talk with the author a little bit and say, you might want to change the story. Give Jesus a few tips on good story writing. You know, let's go with the Wonderful Life ending would be a lot better. But it's not a happy story. It's a tragic story. The servant, upon leaving with a wonderful gift, sees someone who owes him less than a day's pay. And the servant, while carrying this priceless gift, drops it, leaving it on the sidewalk to grab the collar of the man who owes him a few bucks and shout, "Show me the money! Show me the money! Give me my money!" The guy falls to his knees. "Please, I don't have it. Could you spare me and be merciful? Have patience." It should be one of those deja vu moments for the servant who just himself had prostrated himself before the king, begging for something similar, begging for that gift. But he doesn't relent. He wants his money. And now some guards of the king have seen this man throw down on the sidewalk this priceless gift and go after the other man. And they know how priceless this gift is. They find it strange. They pick it up and they take it back to the king. Now, I've heard people get mad at this story because the king takes back the gift and throws the servant in jail. And they say, well, you can't give a gift and then take it back. And they get really mad at the king and wonder what kind of king this is. But I think the king is just picking up the gift the servant threw away. He threw away that gift, an invaluable gift, forgiveness of 10,000 talents, to try to grab a couple of denarii, a couple bucks. He threw the gift away. The king didn't seize it. He retrieved a rejected gift. Why would that servant who owed so much, who was given such a wonderful gift, throw it away like that? He didn't trust the gift. Now, if you have been in college recently, or whenever, you know that an open notebook final is a pretty good gift. If you have any sense whatsoever, that should be an automatic A, as long as you bring your notebook and prepare it. I did not. And it's not because I was lazy. I studied really hard. I just didn't believe the professor was serious. I thought it was a cruel joke. I spent all my time studying the material, but I didn't utilize the gift. When the exam came, I wish I had had my notes, because while it was indeed an open notebook test, he made it a particularly hard test that you really needed your notebook for. We were given a gift, and I dropped it on the sidewalk when I walked out of the class because I didn't trust the gift. How do I know the servant didn't trust the gift? I will tell you why. I know that because what happened when he left the king and met the guy who owed him a couple bucks simply could not have happened if he had really received that gift. It would have been utterly impossible had he really been forgiven of all that debt and received it. He wouldn't have even noticed the guy who presented himself and said, "Hey, I owe you 20 bucks. He'd say, "What 20 bucks? I mean, he was just forgiven $100 billion. What's 20 bucks? The man in the parable couldn't trust the gift. He couldn't allow himself to accept the gift. It's why he threw it on the sidewalk the first chance he got and went after something he could trust and receive, a debt owed to him. Why wouldn't he receive the forgiveness that was offered? I think because he went to the same Sunday school I went to. Do you remember that lesson? Maybe you went to the same Sunday school class that had the flannel boards. And it says, never take anything from anybody. Everyone's got to pull his or her own weight. No handouts. You work for what you get. Nothing's free. Have you ever learned that lesson? I sure learned that lesson. Do you remember the lesson that said anybody can become anything they're inclined to be if they work hard enough at it? Just go out there and go for it. It's the American way. And we seem to despise charity to those we think don't deserve it, who we judge as lazy or victims of their own choices, or who didn't pull themselves up by their bootstraps like the 1 out of 100 that come from their neighborhood. We learn and we're taught that God helps those who help themselves. Anyone ever heard that before? That's nowhere in the Bible. Not true. In fact, the exact opposite is true in the Bible. And yet, we learn that lesson over and over again. God helps those who help themselves. We learn it so well that we can't accept the gift when it's given. You know, the servant who was summoned to see the king, that could have been you or me. In fact, perhaps it is. Let's try it out. The king calls us to see him. And we know what he wants. We haven't given what we should to the king. We haven't acted as we should. We haven't followed the king's laws. We have not been good citizens of the kingdom. We are massively in debt. The king comes out with this huge ledger book, plops it on the table, opens it up to find the page with our name in the top right-hand corner. The king looks at the bottom line and says, it says here you owe me a whole lot. Is this figure even right? It says you're in debt for over 1,000,000 zillion. Is that correct? And every one of us in this room this morning must answer, yeah, that's correct. I'm heavily in debt. Even 125,000 years of effort would not suffice it to repay this debt. Just take a moment. Think about each of those debts, how they've added up. The wrongs, the failures to do right, the thoughts, the actions, the attitudes, the withholding. Imagine what your sheet looks like. Do you see your sheet? Are you feeling a little nervous? I know I am. I don't know about you, but I hope my sheet never gets out on WikiLeaks. I hope someone doesn't ever record me at my worst, because I know what my worst is. What if your worst was made public? Your worst actions, your worst thoughts, your worst words. The king already knows, though. He has it all written down. But you know what the king does? He takes that sheet with your name and with mine and rips out of the books, and he begins ripping it to shreds like out of Dead Poets Society, and looks down at us and says, I want to give you a gift. I forgive you that debt. All that on that sheet, that's gone. Forget it. You're now free and clear. Go in peace. Do you know what that means for those of us who can receive that gift? For those of us who can let ourselves off the hook, do you know what that means? It means a lot of things. But I'll tell you the first thing that it means. It means nobody's going to have to tell us how to act when we see someone else who needs that same gift and asks us for it. It means we're not going to throw it on the sidewalk as soon as we see someone who wrongs us, so we have a chance to hold something of ourselves back. It means we're going to receive the gift and hold on to it with everything we have, even if that means loosening up our grip on some other things. Our time, our talent, our treasure. Because the gift we just received is so much more valuable. And think about it, you can't hold on to it so tight if your arms are already too full of your other stuff. It means we're going to be grateful and we're going to show it with a gift of our own. That is, if we've received the gift. if we've received the gift of grace. So how do you know if you have? I mean, it's easy to take it. But how many people have received a wedding gift and they find it in their attic 50 years later unopened? I've cleaned out my parents' cabinets before, and I'll be looking the way back, and I say, oh yeah, we got that as a wedding gift. Like, it's never been opened before. It's 30 years old. Did they really receive that gift? You can come to church every Sunday. You can say the prayer. How do you know if you've really received it? Your life reflects it. Not by church attendance, not by saying a certain prayer, not by just asking Jesus into your heart. You live differently when you've received the gift. And that may look different from your neighbor, but you know. You know. I want you to take the next minute in silence and just consider. Have I accepted the gift? How do my decisions, my opinions, my generosity, my relationships, my choices show that I have received the gift? Think about that for a minute, for this week. And I challenge you to share with someone you know this week that you trust your answer. How does your life reflect that you've received the gift? Take a minute. Answer for yourself.